Let's dive into a really fascinating paradox. It's this idea that the one thing we value so much in our society, intelligence, can actually build this invisible architecture of isolation around the very people who have the most of it. So, how does this happen? Let's get into it. Right off the bat, this question kind of goes against everything we assume, doesn't it? We think of intelligence as this golden ticket to success, to connection, to a better life. So why does it seem that for some of the smartest people, it's actually a doorway to a much, much lonelier room? Well, the answer starts with a really surprising discovery from the world of social science. Okay, so this is where things get wild. Some incredible research from the London School of Economics basically flips a universal truth completely on its head. For most of us, right, the more we socialize, the happier we feel. Makes sense. But for the highly intelligent, the exact opposite is true. For them, spending more time with friends actually correlates with lower life satisfaction. I mean, what on earth is going on here? To really get our heads around this, we need to look at the external factors first. You know, the cold, hard walls of evolution and mathematics that create this lonely architecture before we even touch on what's happening inside the mind itself. It all starts with something called the Savannah theory of happiness. And the core idea is pretty simple. Our modern skulls are housing a Stone Age mind. Our emotional wiring is still calibrated for the hunter-gatherer lifestyle of our ancestors, where your survival literally depended on being part of a small, tight-knit group. So, for most people, when we're around our friends a lot, it triggers this ancient signal deep in our brain that says, everything's okay. It's an evolutionary echo whispering, you've got allies, you're safe, you belong. Our happiness is literally tied to recreating those social conditions of the savannah. But here's where the path splits. The highly intelligent brain is just, by its nature, better at dealing with new, complex problems that just didn't exist way back then. Think about pursuing these huge, long-term goals, like scientific breakthroughs or creating incredible art. That requires deep, uninterrupted focus. For these minds, constant socializing isn't a safety signal. It's static. It's noise that gets in the way of the crucial work their brain is built to do. But, evolution is only half the story. The other half is just a brutal numbers game. For someone who is profoundly gifted, finding a person who genuinely gets their internal world isn't just difficult, it is a statistical long shot. This creates what some people call a peer vacuum. Let's try to put this into perspective. An IQ of 130 is often the benchmark for being gifted. Your odds of meeting someone at that level or higher are about 1 in 44. So you might find one person like that in a couple of classrooms. Not impossible. But now let's jump up to an IQ of 145. Suddenly, the odds stretch to 1 in 741. Now you're maybe looking for one person in your entire high school. The pool of potential intellectual peers is just shrinking fast. And at an IQ of 160, the odds are just staggering. 1 in over 31,000. To give you an idea of what that means, you are more likely to be struck by lightning in your lifetime than to just randomly bump into an intellectual peer. So this loneliness, it's not just a feeling, it's a mathematical reality. And hey, even when you do meet people, there's another hurdle. A pioneer in this field, Leda Hollingsworth, came up with this idea of a communication range. Her research suggested that a really meaningful, deep connection becomes incredibly difficult when the IQ gap between two people is more than about 30 points. You can talk, for sure, but you're not really connecting on the same wavelength. So, we've got these external walls of evolution and statistics. But now we have to go inside. What is it actually like to live inside a mind that is wired so very, very differently from the norm? A really crucial concept to understand here is something called asynchronous development. It just means that for a gifted person, their mind, their emotions, and their body are all growing at different speeds. They are literally out of sync with themselves, and as a result, out of sync with the world around them. Just try to imagine what that feels like for a second. You could have a kid who has the mental machinery to grasp the complexities of social injustice, but they still have the emotional toolkit of a 6-year-old. So they might have a total meltdown because they can't tie their shoes. This internal mismatch is incredibly confusing and just alienating. Now, this inner world is also supercharged by something the Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called overexcitabilities. This isn't about being hyperactive in the way we usually think about it. These are inborn, intense ways of experiencing reality. It's like the volume dial on their entire nervous system has been cranked up to 11. And there are 5 kinds of this intensity. Someone with psychomotor OE isn't just energetic. Their need for action can feel totally overwhelming to others. Intellectual OE isn't just being smart, it's this relentless, sometimes abrasive need for truth and logic. And then you have emotional OE, which means feeling absolutely everything with an extreme depth and complexity. Each one of these, while being a source of incredible potential, also creates constant friction with a world that just experiences things at a much lower resolution. So you can see how this intense inner and outer experience often leads to a state of crisis. But what if that crisis isn't a sign that you're broken? What if it's actually a necessary part of a much deeper, more meaningful journey? This brings us to Dabrowski's most radical idea, the theory of positive disintegration. He basically argued that for a person to reach their absolute highest potential, their old psychological structure has to fall apart first. So things like anxiety, inner conflict, even depression, they aren't necessarily pathologies to be cured, they are the engines of profound personal growth. Dabrowski himself said it best. This kind of suffering is what forces a person to question absolutely everything. It's what moves them from just existing in the world as it is to actively building a personality based on how it ought to be, a life that's guided by their own authentic higher values. And it is so important to make a clear distinction here. This theory is not about romanticizing pain, not at all. An existential struggle is one thing, but severe clinical depression or suicidal thoughts, those are medical crises. They always require professional support. This theory gives us a framework for growth. It is never an excuse to avoid getting help when you need it. So, if this loneliness is this product of architecture, intensity, and maybe even a necessary crisis, where does that leave somebody? How do you find a way through it? Well, the path forward begins with understanding a survival mechanism that comes at a really high price. It's called social masking. From a very young age, a lot of gifted people learn to hide who they really are. They learn to dumb down their vocabulary, to hide their intense curiosity, to dial back their emotional reactions. It's a constant, absolutely exhausting performance, and it's designed for one thing, social survival. But the cost is this profound feeling of being a stranger to yourself. So the path back to connection really involves consciously reversing that process. First, you have to recognize the mask. Just see it for what it is. Then you can start to practice taking it off, but selectively, with safe people and in safe places. And finally, you have to actively seek out your tribe, those rare people who don't just put up with your intensity, but who actually mirror it and celebrate it. Which really leaves us with a final way to reframe this whole experience. What if that deep, aching loneliness isn't a flaw? What if it's not a sign that there's something wrong with you, but actually a signal? A signal that your mind is just waiting for a connection that is every bit as rare and as powerful as it is.